significant heat pump markets. So we give, by tendency, a very robust perspective of the European market with a few things to note. The data is collected by the National Heat Pump Association, meaning we have a shared questionnaire that we send to everybody, to our national associations. They fill it in and send it back to us, and then it's aggregated inside our data system. We are counting data for air-to-air heat pumps, but in our calculations, we only use the ones that we see are used for heating. So we count the whole number. It's not presented today because that wasn't part of the idea that we wanted to show you, but it's in the report. Then we look at VRF systems. We look at air-to-water, water-to-water, ground-to-water units used for heatings, and we single out sanitary hot water units, and I will explain why in a second. The calculation for the renewable contribution to Europe's energy system is calculated based on the EU methodology, and the energy savings are calculated based on a comparison between the best available fossil technology, notably a gas boiler, and a heat pump. If we are taking comparisons with the EU heater market, then we are assuming that the heater market is about 7 million units, and that these are installed in a building stock of 115 to 120, sorry, not 115 to 120 buildings, but it's actually million buildings. So 115 to 120 million residential and commercial buildings. We have checked this data with Euroconstruct, and they say it makes sense from their perspective. Unfortunately, the data situation on the number of buildings and the quality of buildings in Europe is insufficient, to say the least. All this we put together in a report. It used to have 145 pages. We have to see how much we need this year. It's covering these 21 countries, and it's backed up by an online tool for dynamic evaluation. As some of you have heard, we had some problems with our data container in the past. We are rebuilding it as we speak. The basics are there, and over the summer we will now fill in the remaining bits and pieces. So at the end of the summer, all this will be functional again, and you will be able to get a PDF. And we're giving you a glimpse now on the data, because if we wait too long with that, it's also old news. You have probably seen a number of press releases, and you have seen other publications in which we have shown this graph. This graph shows quite nicely how breathtaking growth has been in 2021. There has been growth since 2012, so more than 10 years we have seen a growing heat pump market. In the beginning a bit slow, now much faster, and we expect that this double-digit growth needs to continue also in numbers beyond 20%, at least for this decade. 2021 for sure was exceptional with 34%. I need to caution you all a little bit. We do not expect the same number to be possible in 2022, mainly due to supply shortages. There is enough capacity also inside Europe. So if this was a question, we are not in need in Europe of United States or other heat pumps to fulfill the demand. By capacity, there is limitations that I will talk about in a minute, but in principle, there is enough capacity in Europe to install and to deliver to demand. So on the right side, you see one of these nice production lines, and we recently, last week, we had a seminar on the need to upgrade production facilities to mass production, which will have a number of benefits also for the cost situation, etc. If we just keep the recognition for the moment on only the number, then these 2.2 million units that were sold in 2021 have added to a total market of all heat pumps that is now 17 million units. So somebody says they don't see the slides. Do you see the slides? Or am I just talking in the blind? If you're Dana, if you're here with
slides.
Okay, so
yeah, we can see
the
them.
slides. If somebody is using their mobile phone, for example, then you have to probably move it around left and right, horizontal, vertical. So it seems most people can see the slides, so I will just continue here. So the heat pump benefits based on these 17 million units, and heat pump benefits have now been acknowledged. They provide useful heat. We are counting a total thermal capacity of 147 gigawatts. And if they operate around 2,000 hours per year, some more, some less, then we have a useful energy provided of 283 terawatt hours. then we are, and this is against the backdrop of around 6,000 terawatt hours that is used for heating. So it's still rather small when it comes to that. But we have to see that the useful heat that is needed is also smaller, because inherently in fossil boilers you have quite a lot of losses. Of these 283 terawatt hours, 179 terawatt hours are renewable energy. The rest is auxiliary energy at the moment. And let me make that very clear. We are in the Renewables Directive only counting the renewable thermal energy, and the renewable electricity, which is also 40%, even in this graph, is today counted in the electricity statistics. But of course, if you make your own math and, for example, you get a green tariff and you have a heat pump, then you have 100% green heating and cooling system. This leads to fossil energy savings of a minimum of 229 terawatt hours and CO2 savings that are obviously related to that of 45.9 megatons. And there is the advantage, the additional advantage, that there is no particulate matter at the point of operation. And if you consider that we don't want gas-driven cars anymore in cities, then the question is, why do we still allow polluting heating systems in cities? But I think there is going to be a lot of change. On top of it, an unused demand-side flexibility potential of up to 3.9 terawatt hours. That's really back of the envelope calculation, because it is mostly just that, it's potential, it's not used. Also, heat pumps provide employment. We are counting, what we have done is we have assessed how much time we need to do all these different steps of manufacturing, installing and maintaining heat pumps. And then we conclude that we need around 160 and 117,000 full-time equivalents to deliver to this market. Obviously, since not everybody is working full-time in heat pumps, the real number of people working in the heat pump industry, in the heat pump sector, is bigger. The interesting observation that we could make is that the heat pump industry is very dispersed across Europe. We have factories in the most remote areas of the continent, which is important because they provide jobs, export potential, and perspective to local communities. We have counted more than 170 sites. This is a survey with our members. It's an industry that is mostly SME based, even though some of these SMEs are touching €1 billion turnover with heat pumps, but nonetheless, it's still rather smaller in size and capacity. And we are looking at a turnover of, I think this should even be bigger now, but something like 10, 11 billion euros. Let me check that before you note it down anywhere. Then we are looking at the market growth separated by rough technology categories. You can see here the first important point in this graph is the annual sales doubled over the last 4 years. So from 2017 to 2021, we have doubled annual sales. And what we're counting, that is also visible here, you see geothermal units, brine to water mainly, but also water to water. These are not distinguished, make for about 6% of annual sales in 2021. Air to water is the next big share, then air to air, then sanitary, hot water. The others is very small. We just have it so that in our tables the numbers are complete. So you see here that that the majority of energy that is used is air. We'll show that. Then I've singled out the sanitary hot water heat pumps because they are a great entry-level solution for those installers that are not so comfortable yet with heat pump technology, and also for those end consumers that are not so comfortable yet with do heat pumps work or not. You can put them next to a fossil boiler, any type. You could even put them into a passive house where you only have a ventilation system, but you still need hot water. You could also put them next to an air-to-air air conditioning unit, because if you have air conditioning, or maybe that is your main need, you will still need hot water. So in these type of buildings, the tendency could be that there is 2 heat pumps in one building. One word, really an excursion, industrial heat pumps. We don't have proper numbers. I'm sorry to say that. This is a survey we have done in 2019. We haven't managed to do a second one on the same level. You can see here that there is a significant market for industrial type of units that come in capacities of several hundreds up to megawatts. And you see in the news, individual news of a race to the top, a heat pump that is doing 8 megawatts for district heating, a heat pump that is doing 25 megawatts, 35 megawatts. So there is a market for that, but we don't have a proper grasp on it, and we are working to improve that situation. So my first conclusion here, 2021, the heat pump market share is about 13% based on these 115 to 120 million buildings and based on a stock of heating heat pumps, different number, mind that, because I deducted the stock of sanitary hot water heat pumps of 15.3 million units. So it's a significant number. It's good enough to grow fast. I think that's the important point here. If we split this up further, sales of heat pumps in 2021 by type, then you see that that air-to-air heat pumps have the biggest individual share, and that this includes also the VRF systems, and then air-to-water and reversible air-to-water are actually even slightly bigger, but we distinguish that. So it looks slightly deviating. If you would add the air-to-water and the reversible other, which is reversible air-to-air mainly, air-to-water mainly, then you would come up with a number that is even bigger than the 800,000 units for air-to-air. Then you see sanitary hot water units, you see groundwater units, as I said, about 6%, some hybrids that are mainly driven at the moment by government support in Italy and France, and exhaust air heat pumps are gaining ground. The other ones are negligible. Here again, to explain, air dominates as an energy source, and the European Commission has recently started to distinguish between hydronic and not hydronic units. That means that the heat pump is using either air as heat distribution system or water, and so you see the setup in this, the split up in this. Then if we look at the different countries, it's very important to note that there is different building traditions. And in the Nordics and in the Mediterranean, air-to-air heat pumps are much more typical than in Central Europe, where geothermal and air-to-water units prevail. And that's important to note, because if we want to get rid of fossil gas, then fossil gas can be replaced by either air-to-water and geothermal units, but it can also be replaced by air-to-air units, especially in office buildings, and if you need hot water, by an air-to-water unit next to it. So just note that all these heat pumps replace fossil gas. If we look at sales by countries, who's leading, this is a bit of a race. The countries actually take some pride in being first or not. The French have secured the first position for a long time, and I think it's going to be a long time before this is taken by anybody else. Italy is on second place, but not close to the first one. And the Germans, they are actually saying, well, you know, with our ambition level, our government, we want to install 6 million heat pumps in Germany, and we need to have about 500,000 per year. So we'll move very close to France. Maybe we can even exceed France one way or the other in the coming years. What is interesting in this graph is that 3 countries are responsible for 50% of the market and 10 countries are responsible for 87% of the market. Is this bad? No, it's very good, because it leaves a lot of room for growth in these countries that are a bit, you could call them the follower-ups. And I need to note, and I need to inform you that the UK data is still not up to date, because the UK association did not deliver that yet. They will soon, and they say maybe we have 60,000, but that will not change the roster here. Then if we look at who has grown fastest, Italy has actually grown fastest. You all have probably heard of the super bonus scheme. The super bonus scheme shows with tremendous accuracy how impactful government subsidies are. You can receive 110%, including the financing costs from the government. I'm hearing that the pot of money has actually run dry now. So we will see what that does for Italy, if the people have been teased enough to decide to also invest their own money, or if they only invest if government money is available. France is a market that used to have subsidies. The subsidies have actually scaled down, so it's probably a much more robust market if you consider it in a market economy. And then you see Poland, that I mean, each of these countries would require different explanations why they are there. Germany for sure has just jumped to this level because they have really introduced a CO2 price and a subsidy scheme. Norway is pretty much unaffected by that. It's one of the old markets. I will not go through all of them now. And then we look at market share. Where do we stand? You see that the heat pump sales have increased. This is again only the heat pumps, so the sanitary hot water heat pumps have been deducted. We don't have the latest number for the boiler market, but if we assume that it should be about the same, then we can say that we have a heat pump share of about 24% in annual sales. So 1/4 of the heating market is now heat pumps, and that gives me quite some optimism to assume that by 2030 we can achieve 50%. Can we go further? And this is one of my last slides. yes, if all countries were like Norway, and what we are showing here is the heat pump sales per 1,000 households, then you see, based on the latest household data from 2021 and based on our sales data, then you see that that in 1,000 households existing, 50 heat pumps were sold. It's a metric, right? Because this is not the stock, it's really the annual sales. And you see that there is a number of countries that have not achieved the same sales penetration than Norway and Finland, but also then Sweden and Estonia and Denmark. And you can see here that these markets have very high market penetration, despite the fact that they are long-standing markets. So heat pumps are not only sold in new buildings, heat pumps are a standard solution for renovation projects in these markets. And these markets are mainly governed by rigid climates. So also heat pumps work in cold climates, and not only, they're not a good weather solution. Yeah, you can quote that. Heat pumps are not a good weather solution. I like that. Good, so much higher growth is needed, but much higher growth is also possible. And why is that so? Because we have much higher ambition levels that will actually draw the demand for this technology. I will only show very quickly 2 slides that will be shown later by Josephine. One shows the ambition level of the European Commission in REPowerEU. And what I find most likable in this graph is that there is, for the first time, a heat pump in an official banner of the European Commission. And that puts it next to wind and solar and next to storage. And I think that's what we have to build on the energy transition. And what does that mean? REPowerEU has announced, the communication has announced even 30 million hydronic heat pumps by 2030. I think I have made it sufficiently clear that we believe that all heat pumps will contribute. And if you translate and extrapolate this growth trajectory to all heat pumps, it means that the whole heater market will become a heat pump solution market that includes hybrid systems, but there's not going to be a lot of space for fossil technologies in this future market. And the market needs not only to convert, but it also needs to grow significantly over the 7 or 8 million units that I showed you earlier. You can see here 2030, maybe 12 million units. That will be the real challenge. How do we build this, and how does that translate into national technology, national legislation? And that will be the focus of Josephine's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That's great. There were just a couple of questions in the chat, and I wondered if, in the interests of time, you're happy to answer those in the chat, maybe?
I can just do that, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So those will be there. And in the meantime, I'm just going to take back control of this and go to, now we're going to zoom out and have a bit of a look at the global outlook for renewable energy and for heat pumps with Rana Adib, the Executive Director of REN21. So let me just go back to your slides, Rana, and then you can take over and take us through those. There we go. So you can just click on take control. Fantastic. And just mute. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody, and sincerest apologies for the mix-up in times. I'm in Portugal since yesterday, and I just did not realize that it was the other way around. Sorry for that. First of all, let me congratulate you. I think Thomas and the team, EHPA, and the industry, I think, for the development of the data of the sector of the industry. And to start with, I think from REN21 side, we're the global community of renewable energy players from industry, NGOs, research, academia, and governments. And Thomas has lobbied a lot for bringing the heat pumps into our flagship publication, the Renewables Global Status Report. And we have a full chapter in this now since a while. We have been collaborating on this, and I basically invite you to go to the chapter to read more about the heat pump developments here. I would like to zoom out of, so here you see like air source heat pump development annual sales. So there is some fluctuations when we're looking at the global developments. I think Europe is basically taking another turn than some other regions, but very clearly we see a lot of potential and also developments of heat pump elsewhere. I would like to move, however, to the broader picture. Why is heat pump development so important? On the left-hand side, you actually see, or in general, the message of the Renewables Global States Report this year is, again, that the energy transition is unfortunately not happening. And I think this is where the heat pump as a technology, but also as a sectoral thinking play a big role here. For the following reasons. We clearly see that, so on the left-hand side, this is the energy demand, the global energy demand. In 10 years' time, the share of energy demand covered by fossil fuel has been stagnating. Renewable energy has developed a lot, but not sufficiently. Energy demand has been growing too much, but the reality also is there is a clear structural problem in basically our energy system. What is interesting, I think, and this is also where heat pumps and the thinking comes in very much. When you're looking at 2020, which was a COVID year, this is not representative for the overall trend, but this year clearly shows that by reducing the demand and working on efficient technologies, we do actually increase the share of renewable energy in covering our energy demand. The reality is, however, there is a structural change that needs to happen. When you're looking to the right-hand side, and again, heat pumps is a key solution in this context, a lot of attention on renewable energy has been in the power sector. And this is clearly because it's a least cost option in the sector. And the share here is of 28%. The reality is, however, that we consume over 80% for heating, cooling, and transportation. So from the heating, cooling side, 50% in the building sector, 50% in industry. And actually here, the share of renewables has been almost stagnating. So you see it's 11.2%. You see this orange line basically on the top. This is the development over the last decades. And that is something which is extremely critical. Why are heat pumps key here? I think they are building very much on the fact, on the key success of renewable energy, which is renewable power as least cost option. So this is one part, but also the big elephant in the room, which is the heat sector, which represents over 50% of the energy demand. Now, and here, I think what we see from Renting One side is very much that when you're looking at those structural challenges, we need to stop speaking about the supply side only. We need to move very much to supply and the demand side and integrate the demand side players much more basically in the energy transition. I think that is something which is indeed happening in the European level. More and more also with the target that have been sent with the strategies for the different sectors, etc. It is not something which is very common actually when we're looking at the global discussions. Unfortunately, you go to energy conferences very much, and after 2.5 seconds, we end up speaking about the power sector only. Very often players from the building sector, from industry, from transportation are not part of the discussion. Cities are still disconnected very much from the national governments, and I think this is very clearly one of the key structural changes also in our dialogues and debates, but also in the policy design that needs to happen, is like bringing the supply and the demand side much more together and breaking the silos. So from Renting On side, that's basically a promise we do to the community, and we look forward to work much more with different players here. In the future, we have started already, but we will have like a sectoral assessment of what is happening on renewable energy, for instance, in the building sector, in industry, in the transportation sector, etc., because there is such a need. So here you see the building sector, and indeed here the renewable energy share has moved from 10.7 to 14.7%. But again, heat pumps play a key role here. There are some other indicators, so this is rather really the slide to show you that our reporting will also need to change. So it will be about installed capacities, yes, but it will also be about what heat, what cooling, what energy service is being provided, because this is something which is ultimately fundamental to the civil society also. And then I think we have basically So sorry, I'm coming back to the slide here because I forgot to mention one thing, which is actually the fact that the predominance of fossil fuel is still anchored very much, not only in the energy system, but in our economies. And ultimately, we need to develop also narrative around the economics. And it's about where do we put our money. And I think here I would just like to say again that it's not a technological question. We have the technologies. It is about the right market conditions, but it's also about real ambition and where we put our money. The reality is we're spending today globally 11 million US dollars per minute on fossil fuel. That's a reality. 115 countries are still subsidizing fossil fuel. And with the natural gas prices today, it does actually not make a sense at all. In many countries, it would make much more sense to pay for the investment of the heat pumps instead of subsidizing the energy bill to address energy poverty. When you're looking at the global investment numbers in renewable energy, there have been 360, sorry, it's a bit small, I can't really see it. 300, okay, anyways, I'm not good. I will put it in the chat. Basically, this was the investment in renewable power and fuels. And the reality is when you compare this with the annual investment in 2021, when you compare this basically to the investment that are required in the different net zero scenarios that do exist, we see actually that these need to be multiplied by 3 or by 5 during the next 8 years every year. And this is a massive increase. And I think what needs to be reminded here is that it's we have the choice basically on putting 5.9 trillion US dollar into fossil fuel subsidies. Or even if we're reaching the most ambitious scenarios, it comes down to 1.9 trillion US dollars. So actually, it does not make economic sense where we're heading globally. And so I guess like I'm looking forward to continue building on each other in our messaging here. And also in the messaging that the technologies are there, that the industry sector is there, that we are speaking about massive opportunities for local creation, for another governance also, that also makes economic sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rana. That's great. And now we will okay, I'm just going to share the presentation again, and then we'll go over to Josephine, who will take us through the implications of EU policy for heat pump growth. So let me just do that. Okay, that's just loading. While that loads. There we go. You should be able to see it in just a minute. Can you see that again now?
It's
presentation?
coming. Yes.
Coming. That allows me to. Okay, great. Lots of thumbs up. Yay. All right. So I'm just going to bit dizzying, but let me just scroll through your section. And then you can also indeed take control.
Yeah, okay.
Do you want to take control and then just, yeah.
No, I just wanted to add that in the meantime, because when you were introducing Thomas, you said he's the owner of a heat pump. I just want to mention I'm soon also the owner of a heat pump and looking very much forward to it. So.
Yay. There we go. Over to you, Josephine.
Okay, thank you. I'm pushed. Take control. Okay. Okay. So maybe to pick in on what Rana just mentioned on one of her last slides, it was written that we really need more policies for energy efficiency and renewables, and I think that's a perfect starting point also for my presentation. So let's look at how, EU policy might affect or will probably affect the future development of the market numbers. We have seen in what Thomas has presented that the sector has been growing plus 35% last year, and of course policies that are currently being developed will have an impact on that in the coming years. And one of the first things that will have an impact is the Fit for 55 package. So in July 2021, the climate law was agreed, and this enshrines that EU wants to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 and a reduction of 55% greenhouse gases by 2030. And this means that they have to revise all their energy and climate legislation and the targets, and that is currently being done. So currently the renewable and energy efficiency targets are being discussed by the Council and the Parliament. So yeah, this 45% renewables and the energy efficiency target of 36%. Now the Parliament proposes even there a 40% final energy consumption target. So that's more ambitious than what is presented here. But of course, the discussions between Council and Parliament are ongoing. So curious to see how that will end. And together with the discussion on the targets, a whole range of legislations, directives are being revised. And here I zoomed in on the ones that are really affecting our sector, the heat pump sector. And you see there's quite some measures that are positive for heat pumps. I will pick some out. For example, in the Energy Efficiency Directive, fossil fuel combustion will no longer be eligible for energy savings. Of course, as said, this is still being discussed. It's about as from which date. Will there be a transition period? Yes or no? Will there be some exceptions for some sectors? Yes or no? Also in the Renewable Energy Directive, for example, the discussion on sub-target for heating and cooling. There, unfortunately, the target that is now proposed is no longer binding, but indicative. So that could be more ambitious as well. But in any case, it's good that it's a more ambitious target than in the past. Then on the Energy Taxation Directive, if that goes through, then that would mean that electricity is the least taxed energy carrier, which is very good for the heat pump business case. Also, the emission trading system would add to the good heat pump business case by having a carbon price on heating fuels. But of course, there the discussions are also when this will be introduced for private consumers, and the discussions go between Parliament and Council between 2027, 2029. So yes, this will all have an effect, but we see when, yeah, that will be decisive, of course. And also the EPPD, so the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, contains some crucial measures, for example, to end financial incentives for fossil fuels. Their current date that is being discussed is 2025, so that's already a bit earlier. So we see a lot of good measures, but they could be more ambitious and they could be earlier in time to really have a bigger impact already sooner. But all of this is, of course, accelerated by the energy security crisis and the REPowerEU, as you all know very well, I think. So this slide was already shown by Thomas. It shows that the Commission published this REPowerEU plan on 18th of May. So first they had a communication in March and then a more extensive plan in May to cut the dependence of the EU on Russian gas. And they put really heat pumps very, in the middle of the picture, literally as well. It's really recognized in policy. It's put next to wind and solar. And you also see that in the documents, first and foremost in the targets that are being proposed. So the EU aims at doubling the current deployment rate of individual heat pumps, and they focus on hydronic heat pumps. As mentioned already by Thomas, we are strongly of the opinion that all heat pumps replace gas furnaces. So this should be extrapolated to the whole heat pump market, including air-to-air, and then we would arrive at 20 million heat pumps by 2027 and 60 by 2030. So this is a huge growth, very ambitious. And next to these numbers, in the REPowerEU document, there's a whole range of measures that is proposed by the Commission that they want we want to do themselves, but also that they are asking from member states and other stakeholders to put into practice to really make this ambition a reality. Some of these measures are, for example, to put 2029 as an end date for standalone fossil fuel boilers to be put on the market, higher renewable energy and energy efficiency targets. So this was proposed in May, even though these discussions were already ongoing. So this might still influence this. Also, that there's additional funding needed for the ramp up of heat pump production, with additional funding from the Commission and others. So these are really accelerating this. Another factor that is accelerating or putting heat pumps more into focus is really that we see this dominating the headlines all over Europe. And I would really say that this is also because of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. In the past, you had, of course, people investing in heat pumps were in a lot of cases still a bit of energy climate geeks, so to say. But now I hear a lot of people that really also want to do this because of this whole war aspect, and that want to be more independent of fossil fuels. So this certainly will have also an effect on the sales in the coming months and years. And then, of course, also the national policies, independently of what the EU is doing, also at national level, a lot of people, a lot of member states are taking action to, for example, phase out fossil-only boilers with very early dates already, much more ambitious often than what is proposed at EU level. Also, subsidy schemes that was shown also by Thomas already, you really see a clear effect of very good subsidy schemes. For example, in Italy, for example, in France, also in Poland, the clean air subsidies are working very well. So that also has an effect. And also carbon pricing at national level is really important as well. So you clearly see there's no lack of demand, and in the coming months we do not expect that this demand will reduce due to all of these factors. But now the big question is, can the industry deliver to realize these ambitious numbers from the REPowerEU communication? We see a number of things playing at the moment. So today we see that component supply is a challenge, so including fans. Semiconductors, they are not available in sufficient numbers, and you need quite a lot of them for heat pumps. You need them for the fans, for the pumps, for the compressors, and also to make the heat pump smart. So they are really a key element of a heat pump. So yeah, that's really an issue. Also, there should be enough installers, because if you have enough demand and supply, you still need to install them. So we need to reskill people, we need to upskill people, we need to attract more young people to the profession of the installer. Fourth development that we currently see is that there's new business models under development, new players preparing to enter the market, for example, utilities, but also more industrialization of heat pumps. So to have these, units where different components for a building are put together. So not only heating, but also ventilation, PV, and so on, that is really industrialized, but also industrialization or more efficiency in the production lines and so on. All these things are on their way. And then a fifth point is really that all legislation should be consistent with these ambitious targets, and that is not the case yet. So then I go to the last slide, because in order to really make this ambition a reality, we need, not business as usual measures, not business as usual scenarios. And we really advocate for a heat pump accelerator. And what do we mean by that? We really see that this is a platform that brings together all the players, all the stakeholders, where they can exchange on which legislation is really needed, best practices, innovation that is ongoing, and so on. And the 5 areas on which this should focus are, first of all, that trust in long-term ambition should be created. This might sound a bit blurry, but what do we mean by that? We mean that there should be technology clarity and no longer technology neutrality. So that policymakers really say heat pumps are the future, and companies that, for example, produce still both fossil fuel heating systems and heat pumps get a very clear signal that now they should clearly invest in heat pumps because they are the future. Secondly, clean heating should be economically the most attractive. I presented the Energy Taxation Directive and the ETS system. Of course, this would have a positive impact, but in how many years? For example, the ETS, in worst case, this will only be introduced for private consumers by 2030, which is late. It's very late, so we need more urgent measures on this. We need at national level carbon prices and also sustainable tax shifts to really have a level playing field between fossil fuel heating and electric heating. Thirdly, we need to avoid disruption through legislation. So all legislation should go towards the same direction of these very ambitious targets, meaning that additional requirements on components, on parts of heat pumps, for example, on the refrigerants, on testing methods and so on. This should all, not delay the ambition and be avoided. And fourthly, we need to focus on skills. This I mentioned before. So we need these additional installers, but also broader. We need to look also at planners, at engineers, in the energy advisors, and so on. And then fifthly, of course, R&D should continue. We need better heat pumps and systems. The 3 S's we always talk about: smart, silent, and small. So this is a story that needs to continue. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Josephine. And thank you to all of the speakers from this morning. There's been quite a lively sort of discussion going on in the chats during that time. So thank you to all of you for inputting, for Thomas, to Thomas and Rana, who's ready for answering some of the questions. We do have some time now for some more questions and answers. As mentioned at the beginning, we could do that through the chat function. If you do have any more questions, and just start off by saying who your question would be for, if it's for one of the speakers in particular. And maybe while you're thinking about all your questions, I would just start us off with one which maybe is most for Rana, but also for anyone of the speakers who wants to answer, which is about the US administration, which has recently announced plans to grow its heat pump sector, and what might this mean for global markets?
I think that for global markets, so that is something which is positive. So we really see, and I think this is very much driven, as in Europe, also from the energy security perspective, and also the cost perspective with the increased natural gas prices globally, that heat pumps is becoming a solution. And I think in the US it is something which is positive, because you also have a lot of households and houses basically where heat pumps can easily be installed. I think there is not so that is something which is positive. I would argue in the same way as we heard about the European context, as Josephine has underlined. We need, however, to create the trust and long-term ambition, and I think this is something which probably needs to be anchored more strongly, basically, also in the US ambitions, so that the industry can also establish themselves as continuous or thriving on this as a real industrial development opportunity. Also, I think this is something which the industry has been struggling with, not only in the heat pump sector, but this on and off policies and targets are really critical. And the reality is, if we're today if the industry cannot be sure that even in a situation where the energy prices would come down again, the Ukraine conflict or the Ukraine war is basically ended, etc., that there is a clear ambition and a commitment of the government to create and continue creating and maintaining the market condition that allow for the sector to really operate on commercial basis. I think this is something which needs to be planned and anchored more strongly, basically, also on the US side. But globally, yes, I think there is a massive opportunity. Heat pumps are seen as a solution, and the question is now very much how we also turn this into an opportunity. Here, maybe to add one comment, I had put it in the chat. I think the reality is that from the energy player side, we need to push basically our asks much more into the industrial policy and industrial strategies here, which also means like obviously continuing to talk to energy policymakers and working on the market reforms, etc. But the reality is we're all working together to build renewables and efficiency as the backbone of our economies also. And this means that other players need to come into the discussion.
Yeah,
super, thank you. Thomas.
Can I add to that? Because I fully second what you say. We need the skills, and you could even say also of the established players in oil and gas. And I have two very good examples for that. One is the company MAN Energy Systems that has realized that their compressors for gas transport are actually, if they are deployed properly, very nice heat pumps that can provide heating to district heating systems. And one of the biggest units in this context, the 25 megawatt CO2 heat pump, is deployed in Esbjerg now. So we use the competence and the project know-how of these companies from another sector and transfer it into renewable energy. It's not even for heat pumps only. It's really, this is for renewable energy. Similar example is Siemens that has built compressors for a long time. The oldest compressors have been there for ventilating the shafts of coal-fired power plant, of coal mines. And I visited recently the factory in Duisburg in Germany, and you think, oh, okay, so it was fresh air that needed to be cool when you were digging for coal. And now it's actually compressed refrigerant that gives you the opportunity to lift energy from a lower level to a higher level and close energy cycles. So again, here we have this transposition of know-how from one sector to another. And I also like a lot what you said about this industrial policy. Industrial policy, if you research it, is quite a buzzword. But what does it really mean? What we would like to see as industrial policy is a policy that starts with the end user and makes the cleanest solution the most affordable one, so that we can activate end user financing means. And that's not only you and me, it's really also the end user that is a factory owner or the end user. I'm having this small row at the moment on Twitter. Like, why are we not having more breweries that use heat pumps? No gas for beer, right? Because the president of the German Brewing Association said, oh, the supply of Germany with beer is at stake because there is not going to be any gas anymore. But you don't need gas for beer brewing, right? So we can really change that, and we should do that. And that should be part of industrial policy. Make it attractive to move to renewable energy, and then make sure that you have an initiative that makes it, that provides enough education to opportunities for those that want to start a new career and those that want to reskill. And you provide financing support, including government-backed loans, including subsidies for end users, so that they can really afford the transition and then make long-term use of the benefits of lower heating and electricity supply from renewable energy. Thank you.
Josephine.
Yes, I actually wanted also to add that indeed we need additional players, but also we as the EHPA are also speaking to much broader audiences. It was just mentioned by Thomas that indeed our contacts have been improved much more with DG Grow lately, because indeed we need to focus on this industrial aspect. And last week and also the week before, we had two webinars, one with DG Grow really discussing this industrial strategy, what needs to happen to really help heat pump industry scale up. And also on the innovation fund, we had a discussion with DG Klima the week before that, but that was also about ramping up heat pump production. So also for us as an association, we're looking at these issues now really from another angle, not purely DG Energy recognition of the technology, but much broader about ramping up and large scale deployment.
Great, thank you very much, all of you. There's a question in the chat about the manufacturers of compressor for refrigerant gas. Is there any in the EU? Would that be for Thomas? Do you want to take that one? Just
I was about to type the answer,
okay.
But there is quite a few. You have to distinguish between small and big manufacturers. Of course, in our membership, we have Emerson, Frascold, Danfoss, but there's also Bitzer and Doreen. Big compressors come from GEA, come from Johnson Controls, Sabre. Yeah, and then I think probably half of them, the compressors are really from Europe. Tecumseh, I should mention. And then there is Mitsubishi has quite a few manufacturers. Of course, the factory is not in Europe, as far as I'm informed. And then also Asia. But the value chain is quite global. So you can say today, probably by and large, half of each type of product comes from Europe. It will be a mistake, I would say, if we want to close our gates and not allow a global value chain to happen. At the same time, we are all quite punished by relying on a just-in-time delivery from Asia, because that is really leading to the fact that factories are not working at the moment at full capacity because some components, and that could be quite erratic components like plastic clips, are just not here. So you can't complete a certain type of product. So I think we need to rethink these value chains. That wasn't the question, but I think it's important to mention, and really to find a balance between what do we need to do here for the European continent and what can we safely and should we safely manufacture on the global scale.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's another question. So there was one question about where certain data was collected. Sure, if you're referring to the data, the statistics that we've just presented, or is it something else?
I can't connect it to something. Maybe the person can ask the question again.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there's another question underneath saying, if we speak about EHPA market reports, does EHPA have guidelines on how to estimate the number of air-to-air heat pumps working for heating in countries with different climates? Or does each country define this amount based on its own estimates and guidelines?
What we're doing at the moment is we are collecting the air-to-air data, and obviously these are typically air conditioning units. But similarly, obviously, these can run in reverse. So the heat pump can also provide heating if you just switch the way you use the heat exchangers. And because we are doing that, and because we know that some of these heat pumps are used as air conditioners only, and others are used in reverse mode, and some of them may even be used only for heating and very little cooling, especially when you look at the Nordics, then we have agreed among the contributors to the study that 9.5% of all the air-to-air heat pumps are at least used for heating. And why this figure? This figure is based on a study done by the Italian association Assoclima, where they have asked end users, a couple of thousand end users in phone interviews, what is the only heat generator in your house? What is the heat generator in your house? And those that have mentioned that they only had this air-to-air heat pump, they were counted as, okay, the air-to-air heat pump is a heat generator and not only a cooling device. It lacks precision, I guess, but it gives an indication of where we are heading.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there's some more discussion in the chat and some links to global heat pump numbers. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if there are any other further questions for any of the speakers. I mean,
if I may, I have a question to Rana, but it's maybe just to kick off a discussion, because what we see is that there is a lot of ambition now. We see a lot of governments that are increasing their ambition levels. What we do not see at the same time is implementation ambition. So on the high numbers, everything is great, right? Well, million here, million there, another percentage point on top. But then when it comes to making this real, there is a big implementation gap, not least on the local administration level, where permits, for example, requirements for permits can stop the whole change, or it takes 8 weeks to connect a photovoltaic plant. You just don't get it off the ground fast enough. Do you have any things to share, Rana, on this topic?
A lot of frustration to share, I guess, to be honest. No, because the reality is, yes, I mean, we clearly see, and I think 2021 has been extraordinary with regard to this, on the ambition. You see, like, I mean, there are still people who are questioning whether climate change exists, but I think this is all in all, we see really that there is a commitment, but the ambition action gap is massive. And unfortunately, we see also many countries where there's the permitting processes are really at the core of it. And we see that the fossil fuel industry in some countries is really attacking this in a very systematic way. You see, for instance, pushback on wind. So I take the example of France. There has been a recent release on how this is structurally anchored. There is a not in my backyard movement locally that might be existing, but that it is structurally used, systemically used to basically file and delay the projects of up to 7 years. And I think this is something which will require a lot of attention. Here, what we see is that this is identified by many players. But my impression is that what is required is that the different energy players come together and have so that we have clear data that is showing how painful and how risky this is actually for the energy transition. Because the reality is, when we're speaking about multiplying by 3 to 5 times actually the investment, the reality is this is not going to happen if we have the permit, especially not on the time scale where it is required if the permitting processes are not being addressed. So I think there is clearly a need for the players to come together to show what is happening, how harmful it is for the transition, and having very strong messages to the policymakers. I think there are, however, some good countries where we see on the policy side, there is also an awareness of this problem. I think there are lots of attempts to make those more streamlined, easier, but ultimately it also comes down, unfortunately, as you rightly said, Thomas, to the local reality also and the local resources that do exist. And this is where there is a clear weak point, because let's be honest, if we're speaking about the energy transition, it will be massive infrastructure that needs to be built. And this also means that it needs to be built in an environmental friendly way, but also in a socially friendly way. And I think as a sectors, that is something which we clearly need to address. How do we ensure the societal support for the transition, the inclusion of the users with regard to this? How can we also really say, like, because we're speaking about an energy system that has a decentralized governance and where many can economically benefit. And this is, I think, the next level also of policies we will need to work on, is that the citizens are basically economically benefiting from this directly, because this will also ensure the societal support. And ultimately, I think the permitting process is something where, from our side, so when I say our side, I really speak like the sustainable energy side, we need to do a much, much stronger communication campaign and awareness raising campaign about the risks related to that. Mm. If you see like southern Germany, basically no wind produced. So many countries where basically wind is not being produced. On solar PV, there's a lot of feedback on obviously the challenges on the supply side, rare materials, etc. These are topics that need to be tackled. So from Rentin one side, we are currently working on a whole process and a project which is about the sustainability of renewables. It's not about coming up with a framework, but it's about bringing the knowledge together, but also the different voices and perspectives. Because the reality also is that the civil society or lots of environmental NGOs will also, we clearly need to engage in strong discussions with environmental NGOs, but also trade unions to really anchor, have a positive story about the opportunities that are there, so that the permitting can also be supported from the civil society side.
Thank you. Josephine? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to share some insight from discussions that we have with MEPs, for example, on how they see this happening at local level and what their worries or ideas are. For example, MEPs are concerned, for example, with the one-stop shops and how to implement this, because this is also often an example that we say that works very well to guide consumers from step one to the end, to really take all their administrative worries away and to really guide them very clearly at very local level. I have to say I also have the personal experience in that just to do the subsidy requests, the whole administration that was needed here in Brussels, it was really a mess, and this should be like a one-stop shop in Brussels for that would be super helpful. Also the different people involved in the whole process. So these are questions that we get from MEPs, and also for example in the Netherlands now the minimum as from, I don't know, in 1 or 2 years will be hybrid heat pumps, and then a Dutch MEP was clearly interested in, so should we do more around hybrid heat pumps? What's the difference? So there you see also the need to have more explanation about what is a heat pump, how does it work, what are the different types, and these type of things. So we indeed still need to create awareness also with when, for example, parliamentary assistants, when they just start to inform them about this, and then to help with the local things that can unlock these higher targets and these ambitious numbers.
Great, Rana.
Yes, just on the local part, because I think like one aspect which is also clear when you speak about the local component and we or the local entry point, city governments, we tend to speak about the largest cities actually, which have all in all some capacities for handling those things, but there is many smaller cities, and the other. So here we clearly, I think, need to make the technologies that are available much more accessible and an easier understanding of what it means, because so the feedback we have very much is they are overwhelmed by a quantity of different players reaching out to them. And I think this is something which is also a reality. The sustainable energy space and the solutions that exist here are much more scattered. And as a result, you will not have like one hydrogen player or natural gas player or nuclear player knocking at your door, but you'll have a diversity of players with diversity of solutions knocking at the doors of those players. And I think that is something which is not easy to handle and to make the right choices also from their side. And where I also feel that ourselves as a sector, we can probably work on stronger narrative that already are integrated and creating like good echo chambers on what are the different technologies, what do they bring, what do they serve, what energy services do they serve, what are the challenges, so advantages and inconveniences, but in a positive way and in a coherent way. So ultimately, I think there is a bit, so that's critical towards our sector. I think the cake is big enough. So let's not fight for part of the cake, but rather build on each other very strongly in the narrative so that we can also get the MEPs and also citizens on our side.
Great, thank you. That's very interesting. There's been a bit of discussion in the chat again about the assurances given or not to heat pump manufacturers. And I don't know, Thomas, if you want to build on that at all. Otherwise, I had a bit of a question on the heat pump accelerator for Josephine. Is this something that is would be completely new? Has this happened already for other sectors? Are there examples that the Commission or the EU could follow with this?
Well, there is a precedent in batteries and hydrogen, and we had this discussion with the Commission. Why are you not doing that with DG Grow? In fact, in this case, why are you not doing that for heat pumps? Initially, it was not received so positively, but recently we have heard quite some cautious positive recognition. So I don't want to talk too much about it, not to destroy this small plant of opportunism or opportunistic development. But yeah, it has been done, and I think it should be done again. If we want to keep the industry in Europe, where it is mainly located today, we have to make sure that the home market can go strongly. And then I don't see why not the same treatment that is given to batteries should also be given to heat pumps. If you consider that a compressor is the heart of the heat pump as much as a battery is the heart of an electric vehicle, maybe also the electric motor, then we should not allow that this competence is not available in Europe. And again, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be elsewhere, but we should have significant production capacities also here to make sure that we're not completely dependent on other regions of this globe.
Yeah, I just want to add to that another reason why this is really needed is when we first saw the REPowerEU documents, you really had to do the Control-F search to find all the measures on heat pumps. They were there, but they were scattered so in total there were 12 documents, and I think in 6 of them there were heat pump measures all around. So you really had to search, and it took me quite a while to just extract all the measures on heat pumps and to have a clear picture on what is now in these documents regarding heat pumps, where for other technologies, they had their own clear documents with a clear strategy, with a clear aim of accelerating production and so on. So yeah, that's a very obvious reason why we would need such an accelerator to bring all the pieces together and to bring all the players together.
Great, thank you. And then maybe just one more question. Thomas, did you want to come in?
Can I add a quick one, Sarah, on this one? Because I think it's important also, since we have identified this implementation gap. You can call it accelerator or you can call it anything you like. But what I would really encourage the Commission to do is to set up an annual meeting, can be behind closed doors, but as transparent to stakeholders that want to know as possible, where we do a stock taking on what member states are doing. Because at the moment we have all these ambitions and all these targets on the European level, and then it's transposed into national law, and then you don't know. And this you don't know, that must stop. We need to reevaluate every year. Are we still on track for this ambition level so that we can meaningfully reduce the fossil fuel dependency? And at the moment it's 155 billion cubic meters, but of course it's not only a dependence on Russian gas, it's a dependence on fossil gas that needs to stop.
Yes, Rana.
Yes, I think I'm here at a meeting with different NGOs, and we're discussing the fact that we should probably develop something like there is a production gap report. So on the material side, there's the emission gap report, and that we should probably work together on like an energy transition gap report, which really builds in the different solutions, because the reality is that we're very far off being on track. So we are monitoring this at the global level, but you saw the numbers, and when we're speaking about 3 to 5 times higher, this is like hundreds of % of market growth we're speaking about, and I think this is also where the whole permitting discussion, etc., would really come in to just clearly point the fingers on where things need to happen.
Josephine.
Yes, I wanted to add that now in the proposals that are currently being discussed, for example, in the EPPD, you have the proposal to have these national renovation plans with where also the rapporteur proposes to have clear heat pump targets per member states to include in these national renovation plans. But then that's on one specific part, I would say, linked to renovation. And then you have, for example, also these comprehensive heating and cooling assessments in the EED, which focus more on large-scale heat pumps and heating. So you have these type of assessments, but still they are indeed scattered. And then you have these national energy and climate plans. So you have so many of these plans and of these assessments and things that indeed bringing it all together and having a clear stock taking on where we are. Heat pump development in all branches and overall, and giving an overall picture is really, really needed.
Great, thank you. I mean, we're coming sort of towards the end of our time, and if there are no more questions from participants, I wondered if maybe each of you as speakers would like to kind of give a last message, and maybe if you wanted, it could be around, how optimistic you're feeling about the heat pump sector, and with a bit of explanation of why you're feeling that way. If that works for you, then maybe Rana, I don't know, do you want to start?
Okay, luckily you said you specified it for the heat pump sector, because otherwise I was thinking, how on earth am I coming up with a positive and optimistic message when I'm looking at the overall energy transition? So I think in the on the heat pump sector, I really think, like as I've said, I think there is a clear opportunity. They're bridging supply demand. They're bridging renewables and efficiency. It's a technology which is there. It's a technology that can be produced also with a clear local value creation. So I think these are lots of opportunities I see here. And the current crisis, I think, is also an opportunity to really position it and have an even better economic story to tell. So I think that's something which is really positive. I would also say that heat pumps are not facing the same potential, not in my backyard pushback. Regardless, let's be honest, I think a heat pump that is, and this is where I'm stepping now into my more energy systems role here, without increasing the renewable power massively, and this means like a generation, grids, distribution, storage capacities, we're not getting there. And I think this is basically the part where I would clearly say this is where I'm less optimistic those days, because we see that even though the ambition is massive, there's a lot of investment into stranded assets, natural gas, fossil fuel industry, using the societal challenges very clearly to change the narrative and be disruptive. So for heat pumps, positive. Overall, I hope that after the summer break, I'll be more positive again.
After you have benefited from all the solar power in Portugal, I guess.
No.
What I think is builds on what you say. I think the narrative that we can shape, and I wanted to ask you, but yeah, we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you if that is part of the discussion. I'm a big fan of science fiction, and what I would like to see more is positive science fiction, renewables fiction, if you want, that looks into the positive development potential of a renewables-based world. And if I can just say it, it's not even fiction. This example that how you have introduced me, Sarah, this idea of having a building where you have photovoltaic on your roof, that gives you a good feeling. I can really only say it. Part of my optimism comes from the fact that I find it's an agreeable situation that you move yourself into, where you have photovoltaic power generation on your roof. Maybe you can participate in a shared windmill. Maybe you can participate in a shared power plant if you don't have your own roof. You can for sure rent electric cars. You can have heat pumps in your basement. And all of this makes, at least for me, it gives me the feeling of independence and more control. And so that is positive. If we bring this to the overall audience, to say you can do something, you're not helpless in this situation. Yes, it's difficult to get the things now, but if you call your installer and he doesn't call back, don't stop. Call him again, because there's not only winter 2022, there's also winter 2023. And that you have to prepare for too. Thank you.
Please. Josephine, go ahead.
I had problems with unmute. Okay, yeah, from my side, I would also say there's a lot of positive developments. I really have the feeling also in our daily work, we are really, the sector really gets a boost. We get requests by journalists, by researchers, by potential new members, a lot by policymakers for information, for discussions, and so on. So it's really feels like a very positive development, and also the Fit for 55, the REPowerEU targets, and all. That's all very positive. But then at the same time, the targets are ambitious, and I think more ambitious action is actually needed. So where we feel the whole time, okay, we're almost at this tipping point. But if you look again at the car industry, they now, and yeah, my feeling, have really reached this tipping point where really the phase out of fossil fuel cars is also now being agreed in the parliament. So yeah, also in the heating sector, we can reach this ambition, and it would be more a call to policymakers to go even more ambitious on this and to really make this technology clarity choice, and to be very clear that the heat pumps are the future, or not the future, the present.
Present and the future.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So if there's nothing else in the chat, then it just remains for me to say a huge thank you to our three speakers, to Rana, Thomas and Josephine. It has been really interesting and really insightful. And thank you to everyone who's participated for joining in. As we've said, we will share the recording and we'll share the slides with you all. Please don't hesitate to check out our website, Twitter and LinkedIn, and to get in touch with us, of course, if you have any further follow-up questions. So with that, I wish you all a very good day and thank you once again.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.